I know everyone will call me a monster after this, but I have to be honest. If you only read the title, you'll think I'm the worst man alive. But the truth is more complicated, and for the first time, I'm ready to explain. When I met her, I thought I'd won the lottery. She was stunning, magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into any place and make people bend around her. She had this way of making you feel chosen, like she'd spotted you in a crowd of ordinary men and decided you were worth her time. But I learned quickly that what she really loved wasn't me, it was control. From the beginning, she set the tone. Our first date wasn't an invitation, it was an instruction. We're going out Friday. Don't embarrass me. I laughed, thinking she was playful, fiery. Now I see it was a preview. Every joke came with a knife. She'd say things like, "You're dependable, but kind of boring," or "You're cute," in a puppy sort of way. And if I flinched, she'd shoot back, "Relax, don't be so sensitive." That phrase became her favorite shield. It didn't matter what she said, if I reacted, I was weak. She lived for the spotlight. In public she was sweet, radiant, clinging to my arm like I was her safe place. People would tell me, "You're lucky." But the second we were alone, she'd slice me apart for something tiny. The way I ordered food. The way I laughed too loud at someone else's joke. The way my shirt made me look cheap. I started dreading the drive home after parties, knowing the mask would fall as soon as the door shut. Money was another weapon. She never carried her wallet, always had an excuse. I covered dinners, bills, even things she called investments for her career. When I hesitated, she'd sneer, "A real man wouldn't make me ask." Once, when I told her I couldn't keep paying for everything, she laughed and said, "Maybe you're not as serious about us as I thought." I swiped my card anyway, ashamed of myself for folding so easily. The worst was how she twisted everything back on me. If she went missing for 2 days, it was me time. If I didn't reply for an hour, I was ignoring her. If she texted old flames at midnight, I was insecure for asking. No matter what, I lost. And still, I stayed. Because every now and then, she gave me crumbs of affection, her head on my chest, a random "I miss you," or a soft laugh when I caught her off guard. Those tiny moments kept me hooked, convinced me the real her was under there somewhere. But now I know those weren't glimpses of her true self. They were bait. The moment I should have woken up came one night when I was sick, feverish, barely able to stand. I asked if she could come by, maybe bring soup. She laughed and said, "You're pathetic, you'll survive." Then she went out clubbing, posting stories about how she deserved a night of fun. I lay there sweating through my sheets, realizing I meant less to her than her image meant to strangers. But I didn't leave. Not then. That's the part I'm most ashamed of, how long I stayed, knowing what she was. Because sometimes it's not the cruelty that keeps you stuck. It's the hope that the cruelty will stop. That's where this story begins. I tried to act like a scientist about it this time, to collect evidence against my own excuses. I told myself that if I wrote things down, I wouldn't be able to gaslight myself later. So when she came back with that soft voice and those careful touches, I took notes, literal notes in my phone I never showed anyone. The first week looked perfect on paper, good morning texts that landed before my alarm, a photo of her breakfast with "Wish you were here," a call on her lunch break where she asked about my day and actually let me answer. She showed up one evening with groceries and cooked in my kitchen like we were the kind of people who understand each other without performance. She hummed while stirring sauce, she kissed my neck and said she missed the way I breathe when I'm relaxed, and for a few hours I believed we could be normal. That belief is a drug. It hits fast and makes you think last time was an accident. The turn was so small it could have disappeared if I blinked. We were out with her friends, and she told a story I'd shared in private about how I once forgot my own birthday in college because I was working 2 jobs. She changed the ending, made me the butt of the joke, called me Mr. Reliable who doesn't know how to have fun, and the table laughed. Under the table her hand squeezed my knee like we were in on it together. In the car I said it didn't feel good. She smiled like a teacher correcting a child and said, "Relax, it's content." I asked since when our life became content. She said it always was, I just hadn't caught up. Money slid back and dressed as romance. She sent a link to a boutique hotel with a bathtub by a window and a view that looked borrowed from a postcard. She wrote, "We deserve magic," which is a hard sentence to argue with when you're tired. I said work was tight. She went quiet, not offended quiet, stage quiet, the kind that makes you fill the space with apologies. She whispered that it wasn't about the money, it was about priorities. I booked it and hated that my hands didn't even shake. At check-in she filmed us and said "power couple" into her camera and posted before we got to the room. That night she lay sideways on the bed reading comments about us while I stared at the ceiling counting tiles and wondering when love turned into a marketing plan. On the drive home she asked if I felt closer after investing. I nodded because I didn't have a sentence honest enough to survive the car. She treated time like a trap she could spring either way. If I stayed late at work, I was cold and distant. If I left early to see her, I was clingy and unambitious. If I replied fast, I had no life. If I replied slow, I didn't care. I started editing my messages like they were press releases. I deleted periods because she said they sounded angry. I added smiley faces like bandages. I read her last 3 texts before answering to figure out which version of her I'd get. I felt ridiculous even as I did it, like I was trying to feed a machine that only eats moving targets. She loved comparisons like they were vitamins. My ex did surprise trips. My ex never questioned who I text at midnight. My ex knew how to love a woman like me. I never met these men and maybe they weren't real, but they lived rent-free between us, ghosts I had to outrun just to get to zero. If I said nothing, I was boring. If I pushed back, I was insecure. She made every road lead to a confession I didn't know. Publicly she turned sugar on like a stage light. She clung to my arm at dinners, laughed at my worst jokes, posted a photo of our hands with some caption about finally finding calm. Strangers and acquaintances shipped us like a TV couple, hard eyes in the comments, and I hated how good the approval felt, how it made me forget the way she'd slice me on the ride home for talking too much or not enough or for wearing the shirt she told me to wear. In private she worked at the base of me with soft tools. "You're dependable," she'd say, making dependable sound like an insult dressed as a compliment. "You're not a risk taker," she'd add, like a diagnosis. When I shared a small win, she tilted her head and said, "You act like you cured something." I laughed because arguing would turn the evening into a lecture, but later the sentence sat on my chest and didn't move. She started workshopping us without me in rooms I didn't enter. A mutual friend mentioned she'd been so brave talking about being with a man who's threatened by powerful women. Brave was a new word for her. I recognized the phrasing from her captions. It's strange being reduced to a typewriter label someone else sticks to your shirt while you're still in it. I wanted to print transcripts and pass them around. Instead, I said, "That's not what's happening," and watched disappointment cross their face because I didn't give them a scandal worth retelling. Then came the third character in the play, the one designed to make me move. A name floated up in small talk, a guy from her creative circle who gets the grind and doesn't nitpick and supports without questions. Good for him, I said, and tried to mean it. Suddenly she was busy 4 collabs most nights, back with wide eyes and stories about how productive they were, how understood she felt. One evening she posted a drink across from a man's wrist and let the comment section do the rest. My phone blinked all night with tags and DMs. At 1 in the morning she messaged jealous, and I said no, tired. She wrote boring answer and the next morning accused me of being emotionally distant. That's when the gears clicked into place in my head. Light the fire, film the smoke, blame me for the cough. The worst night was a Tuesday with no fireworks. I told her I had a presentation early and needed quiet. She arrived anyway with a bottle of wine and a small tripod and said we should record an honest talk about couples under pressure. I said no. She slid onto my counter and crossed her legs like a ruling and said I didn't understand her work. I put her phone in a drawer. She took it back, posted a black screen about men who silence your voice, and sat there scrolling while I tried to practice with the sentence burning behind my eyes. In the morning I did fine. When I got home, she posted a shot of a mug I bought with the caption, "At least I've got me." I deleted the app and felt the ghost of it for days, like my hand was still reaching for a leash I'd finally cut. Her solution was a concept, never an apology. She pitched a reset, a cabin, air that smells like trees, no reception. We could start over. Then she mentioned she'd teased the trip to her followers and they were rooting for us, so backing out would be dishonest. Even privacy had to be pre-approved by strangers. I said I wasn't going. Her eyes filled in that careful way that photographs will, tears sitting at the edge like pearls refusing to fall. She said I was abandoning her healing. The word abandoning burrowed into my ribs because I'm the kind of man who doesn't walk away from burning things. I didn't move. She left with my spare key in her fist like a souvenir. Retaliation came pretty and plausible. A story about men who isolate you and call it love. Another about financial control, a big phrase with enough weight to stick whether it fit or not. When people asked if I was okay, their voices were the kind you use with casualties. I said yes and no because saying only one would have been a lie. Then I did something I should have done months earlier. I told 2 friends everything, the whole line of dominoes without romantic edits. It took an hour and I felt ridiculous and exposed and then lighter because their faces didn't twist away. They didn't offer speeches or swords. They just stayed. The midnight emergency came, because it always does. Unknown number, her voice small, a street behind mine, I'm scared, can you come down? Every muscle remembered the drill. At the peephole she stood under the lamp like she'd practiced the angle, the glow catching tears that might have been real or rehearsed. I couldn't tell and that was the answer. I texted a ride code to a friend she trusted, watched the car crawl closer on the map, and didn't unlatch the chain. 10 minutes later a black square with words about being left alone. I slept badly and still knew I had stepped out of the machine instead of back into it. The next morning I stared at a sticky note I'd written the night before with one line, I don't have to explain my no. I made coffee and put my phone in a drawer and listened to the kettle finish without grabbing for a distraction. She dropped off a box later that day with a watch inside and a note that said, "So you're not late this time." I didn't open it. I wrote refuse on the label and sent it back down in the elevator with the courier. That night she posted that some men can't accept generosity and for the first time I actually laughed in my kitchen, not the hollow laugh you make to keep from crying, or real laugh like a bad joke finally ran out of audience. There were tiny wins I didn't see coming. I went 6 hours without thinking of her and when I noticed, I sat on the edge of my bed and breathed like a man who just put a heavy thing down. I cooked a meal too salty and ate it anyway, at a table, with nothing on except the sound of the building settling. I went to the gym and didn't check my phone between sets because there was nobody I needed to impress with photos of effort. My friend said I sounded like myself again and I didn't know what to do with the relief of that, how good it felt to be recognizable to people who loved me before the show. I wish it ended there, with a quiet victory and clean lines, but she spun the wheel again. Nostalgia, pity, rage, sweetness, repeat. Old photos resurfaced with captions that looked like grief performed for a crowd. Some things are too good to lose, she wrote under a picture where my hand is barely in frame. Messages came in from mutuals with linked hearts and questions I didn't know answers to. I kept saying the plain sentence, "We broke up." It wasn't satisfying for anyone who wanted drama, but it was true, and I decided I'd rather be dull and honest than interesting at my own expense. She tried to borrow my reputation to patch hers by calling me in to be her better self again. She stood outside my building one evening in a hoodie that used to be mine, makeup perfectly smudged, and asked if we could just talk without the internet. Her phone sat screen down in her hand, which is how I knew we weren't alone. I told her to email anything practical and close the door. A post went up about cowards and locked doors. My neighbor asked if everything was okay, and for once I didn't make a joke. I said I was dealing with someone who didn't take no for an answer. He nodded like he'd had a version of this, too. That nod made me feel less insane than any speech could have. The next week she started telling people I had anger issues, that I'd scared her, that she left for safety. Those words are grenades. They don't need accuracy to explode, they just need to be heard. I wanted to defend myself with exhibits and timelines, but I saw the trap faster this time. I stopped performing credibility for rooms she curated. When someone asked, I said, "That's not what happened," and let their faces do whatever they wanted. The people who know me stayed. The ones who wanted a villain wandered off to the next story. I kept building a day that didn't point back to her. Breakfast I actually ate hot. A commute where the only problem was traffic. Work I finished without checking whether I was about to be ambushed by a new narrative. A call with my brother where we argued about the right way to fix a leaky pipe and then did it wrong twice and laughed. I slept all the way through and woke up before my alarm and didn't flinch. Healing looked like that, boring repetitions that slowly rewired a nervous system trained to expect explosion. The last time she tried to hook me that month, she dressed it as humility. An email with subject line owning my part, paragraphs full of therapeutic language about cycles and patterns and how she'd done the work and wanted a real goodbye for closure. Old me would have printed it, annotated it, responded point by point like a student eager to pass. This version of me asked a quieter question: what am I trying to get from this that I can't give myself? There wasn't a good answer. I wrote back, "I wish you well," and archived the thread. It wasn't triumph. It was the sound of something heavy finally not dragging. I'm not going to pretend I emerged clean and wise and untouchable. I still have days where I hear her voice in sentences I say to myself when I mess up, and I have to remind that voice it doesn't live here anymore. I still catch my shoulders near my ears when my phone buzzes and have to let them slide down. But the space between those moments gets longer. The quiet doesn't feel like punishment now. It feels like a room I get to arrange. I can put a chair where I want, open a window when it's stuffy, cook badly and eat anyway, laugh at nothing with people who aren't waiting for a camera to turn on. That's where I am at the end of this part, not healed like a cinematic arc, not broken like a warning sign, just a man who finally stopped auditioning for a role that cost him himself, and started living scenes that don't need an audience to be real. She didn't vanish when I finally started putting distance between us. She turned the volume up. It was almost like silence scared her more than fighting. At first, she posted old photos of us, cropping them so it looked like she was remembering better days. People tagged me, messaged me, asked if we were working things out. I ignored it, but inside I felt the pull, the itch to prove I wasn't the villain in her nostalgia reel. A few nights later she called from an unknown number. When I didn't answer, she left a voice note crying about how she couldn't breathe without me. It shook me for a minute, I'll admit. But then I remembered the way she always staged her tears for the camera, the way she used pity like a fishing line. I didn't call back. That's when she switched to poison. Mutual friends started repeating things she'd said, that I was controlling, that I'd abandoned her when she needed me, that she was scared of me. It cut deep, because she knew exactly which words would stick even if no one fully believed them. I wanted to fight, to show proof, to shout my innocence. Instead, I just said, "That's not what happened," and walked away. It felt weak at first. Later I realized it was the strongest move I'd made. Because here's the truth, she didn't need me to argue with her, she needed me to exist in her story. The only real way to win was to stop being a character in her script. And for the first time, I chose silence, not as defeat, but as escape. She didn't let go easily. If anything, when she realized I wasn't reacting, she escalated. The quiet I built for myself seemed to enrage her, because her whole game depended on me playing along. First came the smear storm. People I hadn't spoken to in months reached out, cautious voices asking if I was doing okay. One even hinted they'd heard I'd snapped and gotten violent. I remember staring at the message, hands shaking, not because it was true, but because I knew exactly how she planted that seed. She was smart enough not to shout it from rooftops. Instead, she whispered it into ears that would inevitably carry it back to me. That's her specialty, poison with a smile. At work I felt eyes linger longer than usual. No one said anything, but I could feel it, the shift. She'd managed to stain me without evidence. And for a while, it made me crazy. I wanted to print receipts, forward emails, show screenshots of her words. But every time I thought about doing it, I saw her laughing. Because that's what she wanted. For me to stand in a courtroom she built out of lies, defending myself while she controlled the jury. So I did something new. I said less. When someone asked, I didn't explain. I just said, "That's not what happened," and walked away. Some believed me. Some didn't. But for the first time, I realized belief wasn't my job anymore. Then came the kindness attacks. Packages at my door, expensive cologne with a note, "Thought of you." A box of gadgets she knew I wanted, with a sticky note that read, "Don't say I never cared." Even my hoodie, washed and folded, sprayed with her perfume. I almost kept that one. I held it for a long minute, breathing in the scent that once meant comfort. But then I caught myself, realizing it was just another leash disguised as a gift. I walked it straight to the dumpster, and for the first time in months, I didn't look back. When gifts failed, she tried chance encounters. Once, I caught her outside my gym, leaning against the wall like she just happened to be there. Hoodie again, hair perfect, phone tilted at just the right angle. She smiled like the past never happened, said she missed my calm. I told her, "Take care," and walked inside. 10 minutes later, she posted a black screen story, "Abandoned, again." That used to tear me apart. Now it just felt tired. Still, I won't lie, her voice echoed in me longer than I wanted. Even when she wasn't around, my body stayed tense. My phone buzzed, and my shoulders rose before I knew who it was. I walked into a cafe we used to visit and felt my chest tighten like I was about to be ambushed. Even silence carried her shadow, like she might break it at any second. That's the part no one warns you about, how much of them stays in your nervous system even after they're gone. So I filled the silence with new routines. Small, boring things. Fixing the cabinet door I'd ignored for months. Cooking pasta too salty and eating it anyway. Meeting friends without censoring my words, without checking if someone would report back to her. I even started reading again, whole chapters without looking up at my phone. And slowly, the quiet stopped sounding like waiting. It started sounding like mine. The final test came at a friend's gathering. I knew she'd be there. She arrived late, loud, glowing like always, dragging attention behind her. She told a story about toxic men with fragile egos, glancing my way after every line. People looked at me, waiting for fireworks. Instead, I sat on the floor scratching the host's dog behind the ears, joking about trading lives with it. The room laughed. She didn't. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw something crack in her performance. Without my reactions, her lines fell flat. She left early that night. No scene. No applause. Just a quiet door shut behind her. And I walked home lighter, realizing the show had only ever worked because I kept showing up on stage. Without me, it collapsed into silence. That was the night I knew I'd finally broken free. Not by fighting. Not by proving. But by refusing to play. I thought the ending would slam shut, something dramatic, loud, impossible to miss. But it came quietly, like a door that had already been closing for months and finally clicked into place. One morning I realized I hadn't checked my phone since the night before. No racing thoughts about what she might have said, no bracing for another story about me told to people who'd never hear my side. I just stood in the kitchen, listening to the kettle click as it cooled, and for the first time in a year, nothing inside me pulled backward. She tried one last time, of course. A letter in the mail, her handwriting looping like it was supposed to remind me of softer days. Inside were old photos of us, each with little notes scribbled on the back, when you loved me, when you started to pull away, when you finally gave up. I sat down, read them once, and noticed something I'd missed in the moment. In every picture where she looked alive, I looked drained. Tired eyes, tight shoulders, smiles that arrived late. I slid the photos back into the envelope and dropped it in the bin with the junk mail. Not out of anger, out of recognition. By then, the rumors had gone stale. People got bored of her same story. The ones who knew me stayed. The rest drifted. And I stopped caring who believed what. It wasn't my job to defend myself anymore. I rebuilt in small, boring ways. Fixed the squeaky door. Cooked pasta without worrying if it was content. Answered messages when I could, without writing essays of apology if I couldn't. Sat with friends and laughed without looking over my shoulder. The quiet that once felt like punishment started feeling like space. The last time I saw her was an accident, across the street, her with someone new, performing the same lines, same gestures. For a split second my body remembered the old panic. Then it passed. She glanced at me, waiting for something. I gave her a nod, neutral, and kept walking. My pulse didn't spike. My shoulders didn't tense. That was the proof I needed. So here's the truth I came away with: freedom isn't a dramatic escape, it's a choice you repeat until it becomes a life. It's refusing to explain your no, it's learning that peace doesn't clap for you, it just sits with you in the morning while you drink coffee hot. I don't need to win. I don't need the last word. I don't even need people to believe me. What I needed was my own life back, one that doesn't require an audience, a villain, or a stage. And I have it now. The show's over. The quiet is mine.